Hello, welcome to Stageworthy. I'm Phil Rickaby, the host and producer of this podcast. Stageworthy is Canada's theatre podcast, and on Stageworthy, I talk to theatre makers of all types, from actors to playwrights, directors, stage managers, producers, and more. If they make theatre, I talk to them. Some of the people I talk to might be household names, and others are people I think you should really get to know. This is the first episode of the year, and I always like to look back at this time of year because it was at the beginning of the year that the first episode of Stageworthy was released. And I took a look this year, and to my surprise, it always creeps up on me, the anniversary, and the first episode was released in January of 2016, which makes this podcast a decade old, 10 years old. And I want to thank everybody who's ever listened, who's been on as a guest, and anybody who is thinking about coming on. It's my privilege to make this show, and I truly do enjoy making this show. I do have a Patreon. I'll get into more of that near the end of this show. But if you want to help back this show and help me to make it, go to patreon.com/stageworthy and become a patron. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and like the podcast. Leave a comment to let me know what you think about this episode. And make sure that you hit the bell icon so that every time a new episode comes out, you'll get a notification. And if you are listening to the audio-only version, please make sure that you are subscribed. Go to your favorite podcast app, search for Stageworthy, and hit the follow button. That way, every time a new episode comes out, it will be downloaded directly to your device. And while you're there, if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and you feel like leaving a review, that would be a great help. Ratings and reviews do help new people to find this show, and you'd be doing me a favor by leaving a review. This week, my guest is Joe Szekeres. Joe is the founder of Our Theatre Voice, and it has been a theater reviewer for quite some time. And this is a great conversation, one that I truly enjoyed. And if you're at all curious about how someone gets started in reviewing or just starts reviewing theater, this is another great episode. If you put this alongside with my conversations with Janine Marley, Glenn Sumi, Aisling Murphy, and other reviewers that I've spoken to, this is a great opportunity to learn about what goes into reviewing a show. Here's my conversation with Joe Szekeres. Joe Szekeres, thank you so much for joining me. As a theater reviewer, you see a lot of theater. And just at my last interview before the end of the year was retrospective of the year with a couple of theater reviewers from Toronto. And I'm curious, as we go into the new year, because this is going to air just at the beginning of the year, is there anything that you saw in 2025 that just pops into your head as theater that is particularly memorable for you?
I was out in Victoria in September, and I saw an awesome production of 1979 at the Belfry. And it was incredible, Phil. Absolutely. I had never been to the Belfry before, so I wanted to see it. And it all dealt with, the time of Joe Clark, when Joe Clark was a prime minister, and the company just captured the fun of the whole thing. There was the spirit, the fun. So that would be the first thing is, when you asked me, anything that caught my attention, I'd have to say 1979 out in Victoria.
Now, you are the founder and the reviewer for Our Theatre Voice. So tell us a little bit about Our Theatre Voice and how that got started.
Well, very quickly, I was an actor and director here for the community theater here in Durham region. I'm in Oshawa for 30 some years. And, I just wanted something different. When I never regretted my time involved in community theater. So I started reviewing, and then I took some workshops. There was Will McGurk who used to run the Slow City website here, and he was in charge of the culture, and he knew I was the theater person. So I started writing for some theater reviews for Will McGurk, and then Slow City folded. And then I started to write for Onstage Blog based in Connecticut. Chris Peterson was the founder, editor, and publisher there. I was encouraged to apply for that. I had that gig, and I had that gig from about 2018 to about 2022. And then during the pandemic, Onstage Blog pivoted. And Chris told me at that time, Joe, time to go out on your own. I'm going, okay. And, he said to me that, I'll help you get started if you like. So he helped me get going with a few things. And I just started our theater voice up on, just got it going. And I didn't want to call it, by my, I didn't want to say, call it, theater reviews by Joe Szekeres. I wanted something different. I thought, because technically in a way, it's not really my theater voice. It's, I look at all the actors. I look at all of the artists that I've been interviewing since the pandemic. That's why I used the pronoun our, and I brought some other writers along with me as well too. So that's why I thought our theater voice is probably the most appropriate name for the website at this time.
Yeah. What was the process of getting that started? Oh, like, was that a daunting thing to set it on your own and get that started? What did that process look like?
Oh my gosh. Well, first things first, as we know about websites, they can cost an arm and a leg to find a website designer. So I thought, how am I going to do this? I'm a retired school teacher. So I thought, how am I going to do this? So a high school student who was looking for her co-op hours, she said she would design my website. So I thought, excellent. I don't have to pay a cent for the design of the website. And she built, the actual website for me. And I was very pleased with, with it. So that was built in 2021, that was built. And then for about 4 years, kept going. And I thought, okay, now it's time for a new look, a fresh look. So I kept looking at the old website and I thought, okay, it's time. So I hired somebody in Ajax to design the website. And I'm not going to tell you how much I paid for it, but I thought I hired a guy who's excellent. So the site was redesigned just this past summer. And I felt, okay, to get my money's worth, I'm going to keep writing for the next 5, 6, hopefully 7 some years.
What was, in terms of the logistics of going from working with the Onstage blog and then moving on and setting out on your own, aside from the technical aspect, what was that like? How did you get started and get to like going to do the reviews on your own?
Well, it was daunting. I'm going to be honest with you. It was daunting at first because I was able to rely on Chris to sort of be the editor to say that, okay, he could get me tickets and, invitations, for all these things here in Toronto. But then when he said, go out on your own, you're fine. And I thought, how in God's name am I going to start doing this? So during the pandemic, Phil, I started profiling various artists in Toronto and outside of Toronto as well, too. And I thought, okay, maybe I would just go that particular route. And I started an interview that way. And then after that all happened, then I started sending off these interviews that I had to the various publicists, to the various theaters. They saw what I had written and they said, yes, we would like you to come review for us. So that's how that whole process started.
Yeah, the industry in Toronto and through the rest of Canada does really need as much theater journalism as it can get. The major newspapers are very seldom covering theater. It's only in the last year or two that the Toronto Star got a full-time theater writer. Up until that point, the only newspaper that had a full-time theater writer was the Globe and Mail, and so we rely in the industry on independent blogs and podcasters and all of that stuff just to get the word out. It really is an important part of promoting shows to have people like yourself writing about theater. When you started doing that during COVID, you were doing interviews. Were you doing like interviewing and profiles of theater actors because there was no theater to be had?
That's the whole process right there then, Phil. My first thought was, I thought I might have got my knuckles wrapped because I didn't go through the theater publicists or the PR. So I thought, I'm just going to throw caution to the wind here. And I started going through their Facebook pages and getting in touch with them that way. And then I thought, what am I doing here? But I thought, well, and I didn't have any problems whatsoever with any of the artists. They were very keen to talk okay, about what, how the pandemic was affecting them, their livelihood. And we talked all things theater, where they had come from, where they saw the industry going. And it was quite an enlightening experience. Can I throw a plug in here very quickly about something?
Absolutely.
One of the most memorable interviews that I did have, and I interviewed her twice, was Lucy Arnaz Luckenbill. I thought, I'm just going to throw caution to the wind, and you can find Lucy's profile on my website, and you can also find the first profile through Onstage Block. So I thought, I'm just going to do this and see if I can get in touch with the daughter of television sitcoms First Family. So I went to her website and I got in touch with the PR person, and then they got in touch with Miss Arnaz, and the PR person just said, Lucy would love to talk to you twice. So
Wow.
yeah, and then it was during COVID when after I interviewed her the second time, she was in performing her show in New York City, and she asked me if I was coming to New York to see the show, and I said, well, that was when we still had masks, blah 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 blah,
Yeah.
and she said, why aren't you coming? She said, her words were, put a mask on, when you're on the airplane, if you need to put a mask on in the cabaret where she was singing. And her husband, Larry Luckenbill, is a little bit older than she is, so that's why she has to be should be a little bit concerned there. But anyways, so that was, I would think, one of the highlights, for me was interviewing Lucy Arnaz. Very,
Sure.
very, very enlightening. And you were mentioning about the Ontario criticism. I'm a member of the 2025-2026 Ontario Criticism Theatre Labs with Intermission Magazine. I applied for the program and I was selected. I've also taken 2 workshops through the now defunct Theatre Ontario, writing reviews that matter with Lynn Slotkin. So Lynn led 2 of those 2 workshops, and then I would apply for this particular workshop as well because I want to deepen my writing experience.
Sure, absolutely. I think it's important that people who are writing about theater and especially engaging in criticism have the background to do it. Anybody can start a blog, and believe me, anybody who is out there reviewing and doing stuff is, thank you. But I think that having a knowledge and a background about how theater criticism should work and things like that is always really helpful.
Agreed, 100%. And Karen Fricker and Liam Donovan are we'll call them the co-adjudicators, and we've had some guest speakers in already. And Phil, it's been an enlightening experience, learning more and more about the process. And it's something that I've always wanted to try. I've always wanted to try theater reviewing, and this just fell into my lap when I retired from school teaching, and here we are right now.
Yeah. It's interesting because I remember back in the old days in the 90s when there was an I magazine. You remember I magazine?
Well, I do.
And I magazine was for a number of years the official media partner for the Toronto Fringe. And they'd pull out people. You write about fashion, right? Forget fashion. You're going to write about theater. You do jazz, right? You're going to do this. And then they would get these volunteers and these people who would good, and they would write. And a friend of mine ran into one of them, and he had no experience, but he was really looking forward to writing bad reviews for shows. And it was sure, you could cover the shows, but are you accurately covering when you're just pulling in people off the street essentially to review? It's more than just giving a bad review to a show. There's a lot more to it.
Correct. Yes. And that's what I'm learning with this particular workshop as well. And I'm the oldest person in the class. There are 6 of us. I'm the oldest person in the group. So I'm calling myself the grandpa of the group. However, the other 5 cohorts, Phil, they're young, they're upcoming, they're whip smart. They want to learn. So, as a retired school teacher, what I've learned is I keep quiet and I let the young people speak. And I'm learning so much from them as well too, Phil. The ideas that they have and what they want to share. So that's helping me to grow further in my writing process.
It's interesting because I've been saying for ages, and I think it happens more in theater, and has the potential to happen in the theater and adjacent industries, in that as you get older, there's the tendency to just associate with people your own age.
Right.
I know for myself, that happens a lot, but being involved in theater keeps you involved with people of varying ages. And you can't just go into that space being I'm going to teach the young people, because they will teach you. Like you're saying, you're going to learn so much about, not just where the culture is right now and where it's going from the young people, as well as just like they're really smart.
Yeah, that's why I always like going to the young people's theater to see what's going on at young people's theater, because they do some really good stuff. Herbie Barnes, the artistic director there, he is one smart cookie. He knows what's going on. He knows how to program a season. Okay, and the shows that he has selected, the artists that he's bringing in, and it's just nice to sit back sometimes. When I went to see Shrek, the kids were just wonderful. Sitting back watching the kids' responses, I was having just as much fun as the kids were.
I think that's the great thing about the holiday times when so many theaters are putting on their kid friendly stuff, and young people's theater, that's what they do. They do the kid friendly stuff, but Shrek is just the right time for that.
Yeah.
And having the panto, this is like a lot of kids, their first time in the theater. And how can you not get swept up by that along with them?
Exactly. I went to see Frozen at the Grand in London, and I'm going to be honest with you, Phil. I think I was the only person who had never seen the film version of Frozen. Yes, I've heard Idina Menzel sing "Let It Go," but I knew nothing about the story, so I went in thinking, "What am I going into here?" And again, Phil, the response of the kids, okay, was absolutely. It was heartwarming for me. And yeah, at the end of Act One, when Elsa has that phenomenal "Let It Go," and you see the wind blowing, and it's absolutely spectacular. Except for a little girl, the night of opening night, Phil, who kept saying to her mother, "I want to go home." She sat right behind me. "I want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go home." And there were people around me, you could hear them sighing. And at the intermission, I heard some people saying, "Did you hear that little girl saying she wanted to go?" Now, they never came back to the second act. So
it's hard because sometimes kids are too young
yeah.
to go, and it's hard sometimes to gauge. You have to gauge each kid's readiness to be in the room, right? Some kids are. A couple of years ago, I went to the Panto and I took a friend and their daughter, and the daughter was like 4 years old, and was so there and ready and enjoyed it. But that's not always the case at 4 years old. You have to figure it. And every kid is going to be different. But man, the energy of kids in theater is just something to behold.
It is. And that's why I said in my review for the London production, a note to parents, please, if your children aren't ready, that's fine. Don't bring them, and if you can teach them to whisper, if they need to ask you something as much as possible, have a whisper, because people have paid good money, and don't ruin the experience for the others sitting around you.
Yeah, I mean, it's also hard when kids are that young, because if up till that point they only know TV or maybe even a movie theater, it's hard to get them to see that this isn't TV, this isn't a movie. Those people are there. This is something different.
And that's what I used to find when I was teaching for a number of years as well, that trying to get the kids when they were all just film based. And when I used to teach Death of the Salesman, The Glass Menagerie, The Crucible, and trying to get the kids excited, and Shakespeare plays, Shakespearean productions as well. Coming to see things live, guys, is very different. And I know when I was the head of the English department at my high school, I always try to, get those tickets to go to Stratford, because kids, you got to see this played on live. You have to see it live.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about teaching Shakespeare in school, sometimes I think, and we can't always plan it this way, because it's best to see it first before studying it. We don't always have that because the schedules don't always work out. But sometimes, listen, I've been in theaters during student matinees at Stratford when the pennies start to fly, or the things like that. And I think that happens because the kids resent the work they've done so far. And if we reversed it, they might be more interested in studying, doing the classes, if they've seen it before picking up the book.
Absolutely, yes. And I was big on that as well. Yeah. And if I can only say get tickets for Stratford, say in October, and the kids were say reading studying the Merchant of Venice in the second semester, and I was doing it in first semester, well, I want to still open it to those kids in second semesters. When I was just say, if you want to come along to see it, probably won't mean a lot to you. when you see it now, but at least you've been introduced to the
Yeah.
the art form.
It's just such a fascinating the thing that happens in the brain during the first scene of a Shakespeare play, as the brain acclimates to the language and suddenly goes from I'm having to concentrate to understand what's happening here to all of a sudden just going, oh, it sounds like regular English. And that's just when the text is handled by expert and deaf performers who are able to bring it to life. And suddenly you understand everything.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you can remember Jeremy Smith's Driftwood Theater. Okay. They used to be around. Okay. That what Jeremy could do to intrigue audiences, just in a very unique, I'll call it a simple staging, but he draw, with Driftwood Theater, he drew audiences in, and I thought, this is another guy that, yes, I miss Driftwood Theater. There's another plug for Driftwood. I miss Driftwood.
Now, you as a teacher, you also working in community theater. How did the experience of both teaching and being in community theater shape your critical voice as you started reviewing?
Well, when I was teaching, first off, okay, that, you always had to teach the kids the rigors of academic writing. And I mean, you're a high school graduate, you know all about that too, going through all that. So there was that one element there that I thought helped to shape my writing experiences. But then when I started getting involved in community theater, first as an actor, you're only just, we're only just focused on making sure, what is my part in relation to the whole, and then moving out, okay, to that whole process. So I kept thinking, I just want to be an actor. That's all I want in community theater, do my job, and I'll live till I'm 95, 100 years of age doing that, and everything will be fine. And then I thought, no, I want to try directing. I thought it was time to do that because I liked looking at the whole picture. I like seeing, how this shaped this and how this shaped this, and, how when I directed Doubt twice, okay, John Patrick Shanley, I'm a practicing Roman Catholic, so I wanted to see, how Shanley saw the world, in this private Catholic school of a priest who we don't know if he's guilty. That's why it's called Doubt. There are moments where, yes, he's guilty and he's not. So I like looking at the whole picture. Okay. And then I directed a number of shows as well, too, with community theater, and I expanded my knowledge just a bit more. And then it was time to try something different. I kept moving on again. I thought, I want to try writing. So that's where the rigor came for me. Okay. Is from my working with my undergraduate degree to working with kids to community theater. And I thought, this is where it's brought me at this point. Have I made mistakes along the way? Oh yeah. We all have, none of us is perfect with writing something the first time and look back to say, yeah, if I had the chance right now, I probably would have reworded that a little bit differently, thinking about it. But that's the beauty of writing. And that's what I used to say to the kids, when I was teaching school as well, too. Sometimes, guys, you got to go back right to the beginning and start again. And I'd had to take that message myself, and I've had to live that message. Okay, Joe, you got to start again. This is not going the way I want it to go.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that's interesting as a reviewer, I know whenever I go to see a show, I'm hoping that I'm going to be blown away.
Yeah.
I want to sit down in the theater and I just want to be taken on a journey. I want to be taken away. I want to walk out of that theater smiling and just like walking on air because what I saw was so wonderful. And that happens sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. How do you as a reviewer handle seeing a show that was not its best?
Well, as a community theater actor, I can look at that company and that shows especially with a moment like Doubt, I look, since I've directed the show, and if it doesn't come across as it should, I'd be like, oh God, guys, here's an opportunity to really put in our minds that, is this priest still guilty? Because as far as I'm concerned, the film version, Philip Seymour Hoffman played him guilty all the way through. And that bothered me because I thought, no, it's called Doubt. We don't know. So I feel for the actors. And then, after I see something, then I go home. Then if I'm going to Toronto, if I'm on the GO train, sometimes I'll sit in the GO train and I'll think a little bit. about, okay, what was it about this show that just didn't seem to work for me? I mean, the other audience members might be standing or, giving it a standing ovation, but I couldn't stand because I thought it didn't move me. It did not move me. So so in answer to the question though, Phil, I try not to be negative. I'm not out to destroy any single company, when it comes to a production. Not out to do that at all. I think any person who is out to say this is awful or, no, we're not out to do this. Criticism is taking a whole new direction right now. And I've learned that from this cohort that I'm involved with right now.
I think for myself, when I see something that isn't working for me, I will actively try to figure out, like yourself, why isn't this working? What's happening? What's missing? Why isn't this working for me? I don't write reviews, so I don't have to like put that on the paper, but I like to at least like be able to sit down and say, here's why this isn't working for me, or why isn't it, just to do something constructive with a piece of theater that is not working for me. I think one of the things that can happen, and years ago I was at the Hamilton Fringe doing a show, and I noticed that every review was glowing. Every review for every show was glowing. And that seemed to be a thing in Hamilton, to be boosters. But I think sometimes if the reviews treat a show like it's transformational and it's the best thing ever, when audiences go to see that and they're not regular theater people, that can have an effect on how they feel about theater. They could suddenly feel like, oh, maybe I just don't understand the theater. Everybody said this is amazing and I'm not into it. I think it's important to be a booster, but also I think if something isn't good, we should be constructive, but also not lie to the readers and
Agreed.
and say that, yeah.
Agreed. Oh yeah. No. I would say if, let's just say so-and-so is off on one performance. Okay. For whatever reason, I can't go out and say John Brown was horrible as Romeo, or, John Brown is sorely miscast as that serves no purpose. That serves absolutely no purpose whatsoever to destroy John Brown, saying that he was horribly miscast in the role. Then, okay, for me, it's always right at that moment, and that's what I try to tell people. I'm seeing a show right at that moment. Same thing when we go off to a film. We're seeing that film right at that moment, and what's our mindset as we're watching that film there? Okay, you go and see another film the next day, and you might just say, "Why did I say it that way?" I know some people were saying, I haven't seen it yet, but the second Wicked, which it was just came out. I saw the first one. It's fine. Will I go and see the second one? Yeah, I'll try to. But people are now divided. Some are saying the second half of Wicked it brings everything together quite nicely. And some are saying they're bored with it. They got really bored with this whole thing. So where was their mindset when they were just so enamored with Wicked Part 1? And now they're disappointed with Wicked Part 2.
To be fair to those people, it's the same problem with the play. Act 1 is so good and ends on such a high note. How can the second act live up to that? And it essentially, it almost can't. And so the same problems that exist in the play exist in the film. And so that's how when I go see it, that's how I'm going to be approaching it. They're not fixing the problem that is inherent in the play itself.
But can I tell you something else, Phil, that just to kind of, I can't remember the name of the play I saw last year. It was a Mervish one at the CAA Theater. Tom McCamus was in it. And for the life, I went with a friend, and at the end of the play, okay, and this happened to me, I'm trying to write a notes, and I have tears streaming down my face because I was just so moved by and I tried to write this down. And I brought a guest with me, and the guest next to me I heard my guest going, so yes, that the first act was wonderful, but the second act was just, all McCamus had to do was just, you pick up the phone and in silence, we knew what was being said on the other end of the phone without him having to say a damn thing. But so there's that whole thing right there, that Act 1 is wonderful, and Act 2 left me in tears. And I said to my friend afterwards, I had to walk back to Union Station. I said, I need to walk. I need to, and my friend said, yes, I need to walk as well, just to clear their head for a few minutes.
It's really interesting. I could think of two extremely affecting moments in theater. And one is a few years ago, pre-pandemic, Factory Theater did Men in White, which is a play about Indian immigrants to Canada and their cricket team, but also one of their relatives who's still in India. And that play it was very light. It was very funny. It had all kinds of great chemistry, and it was nice. And then it was tragic at the end. And the entire audience was so silent. And the person I went was weeping, and I had no idea it was coming. And those moments when like the whole audience gasps is kind of magical.
Yeah.
And the other moment that still sits with me is because I saw it at Fringe when it first premiered, Kim's Convenience, the ending of Kim's Convenience with at the very end when Jung takes up the labeling machine and just starts putting the labels on after that whole play and that whole story. It still gives me goosebumps thinking about and talking about that moment. Those are moments when the audience reacts completely honestly. And I remember Kim's Convenience was one of those few standing ovations where the entire audience just stood as one.
Yeah.
So rare, but so beautiful to be a part of.
It was the same thing as when I went to see Mary's Wedding up in the Thousand Islands in Gananoque. Was Wade Bogart O'Brien and Mev Beatty. And I remember at the very end, I was the first person I was reviewing the show. I was the first person on my feed. And I think I put that in my article. I mean, again, I had tears streaming down my face. And I'm applauding because I thought, this is what theater is all about. And I'm like, you just get young people, and I figure if I can try to, bring young people along, go and see shows at Young People's Theater. And if I'm moved by something that I see there, I'm going to tell you, I was moved. I tried to see it from a 17-year-old's point of view. I tried to see it from a 15-year-old's point of view.
Now, you were mentioning that you were doing reviewing before the pandemic, before you set out on your own. And I'm curious if there are any trends or things that you have noticed about the post-pandemic theater world. Is there anything that strikes you as different compared to the before times?
Shorter attention spans. What I'm finding right now, Phil, most plays, I'll exclude musicals for the moment. Most plays are 90 minutes. No interval. Sometimes I use the word interval. Sometimes they mean the same thing. Intervals, intermission, same thing. But that's what I'm noticing is the attention span is limited right now. So to see a show like, let's say for example, August Osage County, the stage play, which is almost 3 hours, you've got 2 intermissions in there. Okay. I think of The Miracle Worker, which is, it could be almost 3 hours. You got two intermissions and a brief 5-minute pause while things happen. So that would be the big thing, though, is the shorter attention spans, and plays are getting no more than 90 minutes.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder if that is, sure, there's the attention span thing, but also I wonder if that has to do with the reduced funding and budgets that we're seeing when Canada Council is essentially giving less, and all the levels of government are giving less to the theaters. And so they're having to reduce things like theater staffing, like the number of actors on stage, like so many things. I wonder if that kind of thing is also a product of that.
It is, because today in the mail, I received 4 letters from 4 different theater companies looking for donations this year. I'm not going to mention who they are. Okay. But so I thought, yeah, I would agree with you there as well, too, that the funding is limited.
Yeah.
And the to be an actor today, okay, I have to salute them. My hat's off to them, okay, because it's such a, you're always going from one gig to the next. I don't think I could live that kind of life.
It's very difficult. And that's why a lot of times, a lot of actors have, you could call it a limited shelf life. They sort of last through their 20s into their 30s when it starts to get really hard because you want like a little bit of comfort. You're tired of having roommates and things like that. It could be quite a slog, especially as you start to get a little bit older.
There was one actor I know we used to perform at Stratford for a number of years. And he was on the Stratford stages with, many of the big names. And then he went into teaching. He just said, he wanted to start a family. And he just said, I need to know when I start my family and I start raising children that, I have to have survival, for my family. I have to have a steady income. So, I can see that happening too.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious about, not curious, but I know what it is, but I want to talk about the importance of going to the theater and what theater gives to people who go, to the audience, and just generally, as far as the way that you think of it, what is the importance of theater?
First off, enjoy yourself. That's the first thing, okay? That if it's not an enjoyable experience, why are you going? There's the first thing, all right? And then, out of the enjoyment as well, too, hopefully, you can learn something about yourselves. We can learn something about our lives. We can learn something about the individuals with whom we associate. So I would say those two things, enjoyment and keep learning. And if we can find playwrights who are always wanting to delve further into the human psyche, into the way people behave and why they behave and how they behave, that's all part and parcel of the human experience. But I always hark back to then, Phil, to why am I going to the theater? People ask me, why do I go? I enjoy it. I tell them I enjoy it. And if I don't enjoy it anymore, I'm not going to do it anymore.
Yeah. I had a friend a number of years ago. They were not a person. They were a work friend from the day job. So they did not come from a theater background. And they wondered why I was a theater person, why I liked the theater over film. And I had to try to explain to them what it's like being in the room with the actor, what that changes about the viewing experience, how it becomes active and not passive, and how even violence is more visceral, even though a stage slap is not a slap, but an audience will always react to it. It's this magical thing and the suspension of disbelief. I don't know if I managed to get it across to him, but I was trying to explain, it's not the same. They're such different things.
Absolutely. When I went to Montreal just this past weekend to see the English language premiere of Kisses Deep, okay, it was such a visceral experience. I hadn't seen the French translation en glace, but this was the English translation, and I was mesmerized, Phil. Just mesmerized by the story of a man who we think there's a relationship with his mother that we're uncertain about here, okay? But his mother has been accused of assault against a school teacher. So this guy wants to become a couturier in the fashion of Yves Saint Laurent. So we meet Yves Saint Laurent, and when this gentleman is, when things work out well for him, he goes and he kisses people. And that's where the whole brunt came of this whole story. Okay, with that particular action is, especially in this whole era of hashtag Me Too, how appropriate is that? It was a fascinating exploration, Phil. Absolutely fascinating.
Joe, I'd like to move a little bit away from theater criticism and viewing theater. I'd like to talk a little bit more about you. And I'm curious, you mentioned doing community theater and teaching. What first brought you to community theater? What brought you into the theater as somebody who wanted to do it in some way?
I had a couple of mentors when I was in high school. My dear late friend, Ruth Nichols, she was my English teacher, and she also directed the high school musicals that I was involved in. And she was the one who really, got me interested in theater. So I have to credit my dear late friend, Ruth, who said, start looking into the theater. And I also got involved in theater during my years at Western. I'm an undergraduate from undergraduate degree at Western University, and I did the musical cabaret there. And, being on the stage at Talbot Theater, that huge, huge stage just instilled a love of performing for me. So that's where that whole thing came from.
Were you somebody, when you were growing up, was theater going something that you did, or did you come to that in high school? And
I came to that pretty well in high school because my mother was a widow. So my late mother was a widow. So she, she ran up, my dad started a tool and die shop in South Oshawa. Then after he passed away, mom took that over in 1962, and then she raised 3 children. So there were those times, where it was just, she went to work, she came home, we came home, had dinner, homework, played with the kids on the whole 1968, 69, playing with the kids on the street until the street lights came on. And then we all had to come in. So the love of the theater, Phil, came pretty well when I was in high school, my undergraduate years.
Was there, when you started going to it, how did you get involved with the community theater out there?
What was it was probably when I finished teachers college, it was my first year of teaching, that the first show I auditioned for at the Oshawa Little Theater, I wasn't cast. Okay. So I thought, okay, that's fine. So I went and I just, was going along and doing my teaching, my first year teaching. And then I saw the second show come up at the Whitby Courthouse Theater. So I said, I'm going to give this a shot again. So I went. I had to come up with a Swedish accent, and I thought, can I do a Swedish accent? I'm not going to do it here, Phil. I don't want to embarrass myself. So I went into the audition with a Swedish accent, and I got the part. So somehow I managed to do that. The play was Ayn Rand's Night of January the 16th. So that just began in 1980. That went on in May of 1985. So I would say from 1985 pretty well to about 2017, 2018. The last show I directed was the Long Road Home for Durham Shoestring Performers in Oshawa.
So you were like at multiple community theater groups.
Yes. Yeah. There was the Oshawa Little Theater, Whitby Courthouse Theater, Durham Shoestring Performers, the Borellians up in Port Perry. There's one more that I can't think of right now. I know there's one more.
I mean, one of the things I think that when we are people who live in Toronto or in bigger cities with larger theater scenes, with professional theaters, we don't think about the importance of community theater to a place like Oshawa or Whitby or Port Perry or places like that. And in some cases, we might, in the city, might look down on community theater. What's the importance of community theater in a place like Oshawa?
It's a place for like-minded people to be able to share the love of the performing arts, which I think is very important. It does instill a growth, for everybody involved, not just for young people, but even for adults too, to say that, yeah, we can do this. I did think of the other theater, Ajax Community Theater. Sorry about that. How to put Ajax in there. I think community theater is important, for these local communities, but because I think if you instill a love there, you want to come to the professional theaters in Toronto and in London and whatnot. So it's very important. I really see that there's an importance for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I having grown up in my teenage years in Ajax, I was unaware that there was an Ajax Community Theater. So thank you for pointing that out.
It's pretty well just most recently though, Phil. They performs out of the Ajax Community Center, and that was the old St. Francis de Sales Church. So they had to desacramentalize it.
Right.
Yes. The center of that. Yeah.
Yeah. As we are sort of like heading towards the end of our time, we're not there yet, but as we're heading towards the end of our time, is there anything coming up in 2026 in the theater wise that is sort of like jumping out at you as something that you're particularly excited about?
I was really enamored when I first saw Come From Away. When I first saw the first production come through that was the cast that went to Broadway, and then when they brought the Toronto cast in, which I thought was great when it ran before the pandemic, and now all of a sudden I see there are a production will Come From Away in the Grand in London. There's a production up in Sudbury in July. There's a production in Port Hope in July as well, and there'll be a production in August in Gananoque. So am I going to go and see all these? I'm going to try to. I don't know if I'll get to them. I'm going to try to. And I want to just see, as that really important story, about showing about how, yes, we survived, that was a horrible incident. None of us will ever forget 9/11, but there was kindness. being shown all the time. And I want to see how the story of kindness is going to be taken forward in all these iterations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting how, it's like one of those instances. I've been thinking a lot about the way that Canadians don't value the theater, the things that are homegrown until they come from somewhere else. And here is this Canadian grown show, Come From Away, that did have success on Broadway, but also had been running very consistently in Canada, across Canada. And now so many theaters are picking it up and doing it. It's like so many theaters, it's like Frozen is like the Christmas show in many places right now. And then Come From Away will be the spring or summer show.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting to watch these trends. And I'm so thrilled to see a Canadian story and a Canadian show being done in so many places.
And I'm also thinking of, there's the musical that's going to be premiered over at Theatre Aquarius, okay, the Tragically Hip story. And I'm really curious about this particular one.
I'm really curious about that too, because, Gord Downey's songs, they're rock songs, but how do you make those into a theater show? And yet he had a theatrical nature.
Very much. Yes. I'm interviewing somebody next couple of weeks as well, who's writing a musical about Blue Rodeo, In the Key of Blue. So when I talk to the book writer for Blue Rodeo, I want to get some more information, and I also want to figure out how he sees his connections of his story to the Tragically Hip story as well too. And so I'm really curious about, as you were mentioning earlier, these homespun stories that we have right here that we don't need to go to the U.S. Sorry, U.S. Yeah. We don't need to go to the U.S. to tell our stories here.
This is one of the things that I think is, and when I was talking with Ryan from The Cup and Janine from A View from the Box, and we were talking about the whole like elbows up thing in Canada, and how we're not seeing that in the theater in Canada, in the arts, and yet we have Come From Away, we have the Gord Downey musical, you have this Blue Rodeo thing. You're absolutely right. We don't need shows from the U.S. Correct. And I find myself less and less interested in American shows. I'm so much more interested in shows that are born and created here. And I want to see those, and I want to watch those and see them grow.
And I'm hoping to God that more and more people who are involved in the theater are going to start saying, enough, we need more of our Canadian talent to shine here. Okay, we really do, that, yes, there are wonderful actors who are coming into Toronto for various shows. I'm not begrudging that, okay? But at the same time, as Dorothy Gale says in the film version of The Wizard of Oz, let's look into our own backyard first. Yeah. See who we have here.
Absolutely. There's so much talent here, and I want to see it on the stages. And, it's great to be able to see touring shows come in from the States, but I would love to see theaters like Marvis Productions really pour a lot more into some homegrown works.
Fingers crossed. I'm hoping the same thing too, but yes. And because I'm a Roman Catholic.
Yes, of course. Yes. Thank you so much. That's great. Well, Joe, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you giving me some time and telling me a bit about Our Theater Voice.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Phil. I really appreciate this. Could I put a plug in for Our Theater Voice?
Absolutely. Please do.
Yeah. Our Theater Voice, THEATRE voice.com. And if you want to send me any messages, you just send it to ourtheatervoice@gmail.com.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Stageworthy. Before I get to who my guest is next week, I do want to talk about my Patreon. Like I mentioned at the top of this show, I have a Patreon that helps me to make this show. Even though I put this podcast out for free, there are costs associated with making this podcast. There are costs for hosting the audio files, for hosting the website, for editing software, and just generally, and for some of the promotion tools, as well as transcripts, which are back. If you're looking at the stageworthy.ca website, you will now see transcripts moving forward on these episodes. I'm only able to do those things because of the patrons who back this podcast on Patreon. So if you're interested in doing so, go to patreon.com/stageworthy and become a patron. Patrons get early access to episodes, participate in conversations about theater, about the podcast, and have my eternal thanks in helping me to make this show. So if you want to become a backer, go to patreon.com/stageworthy. Next week, my guest is Reed Vanier. Reed is a theater maker and director in Whitehorse, Yukon. I really enjoyed learning about the scene in Whitehorse and talking to Reed. So tune in next week for that conversation with Reed Vanier on Stageworthy.